What's happening, everyone? Thank you so much for joining us on this great Adventure Box podcast. My name is Zach Edwards. I am the CEO of Historical Conquest. That's the company that's bringing this to us. This is a great time. This is the birth of the nation. That's what we're talking about today. Monday and Wednesday. Monday and Wednesday, the last 2 weeks and the next one more week. We're going to be talking about the birth of a nation. We're going through everything with the Constitution, the organization of the federal government. Now we're getting into your personal rights. This is why this is the most important part of the whole thing. Well, okay, the Constitution is also very important, and how we set up the government was also very important. But this is about you and what the government cannot take away with your rights. It is not what the government is allowed to do. It's not what the government grants you the abilities of. These are natural born rights that you have as a person. And this is actually where the amendments come from. You've ever heard of the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment. 15th Amendment was the one that allowed black men to be able to vote. I think it was 16th or 17th that was when women could vote. Yeah, so all of these you need to know. This is what makes up our actual government. Yes, the Constitution is engraved in stone and it gives the fundamentals of how our government is run. But if you're in the United States, it's the Bill of Rights that basically says these are your rights. The government cannot take these away from you. Okay, so that's why it's so important. You want to know what the government has the rights to do and what they do not have the rights to do. And the Bill of Rights is basically what the government does not have the rights to do. Okay, so let's get into this. Let's go a little bit more in depth into what we're talking about today. So, first off, this is basically the founding principles of the American government, the U.S. government. So again, if we're going to talk about the Americas, we got to talk about North America, but that includes Canada and includes Mexico. I would say that's more central, but the way we see things is we have North America and we have South America. And basically where the Panama Canal goes through, a little bit under that, that's where the breakup is between South America and North America. So I cannot actually say America, early American history, because we're not just America, we're the United States of America. Well, there's also Canada, which is in America, and Mexico, that's in America. Sorry to go on a rant, but I need to clarify that. So the Bill of Rights originally came out as a proposal for 12 rights. These are 12 rights, again, that we as citizens of the United States have. Now, they actually had to whittle it down to 10. Now, let me give you a little bit of a head start on what we're going to be talking today. Bill of Rights, but we're also going to go into one of the biggest challenges of George Washington after that was basically solved, or after we're working on the Bill of Rights. His major challenges were with foreign policy, foreign powers, how this was going to happen. This also includes pirates, so wait around to the end so you can learn a little bit more about piracy that was happening during this time. So I hope you enjoy this podcast. Okay, let's go into the first section. We're going to talk about the Bill of Rights. What were the Bill of Rights? Okay, so first, the Bill of Rights was ratified. Remember how the U.S. Constitution was a document that was set in stone to basically produce what our government was going to be today and back then, but it had to be ratified, which means it had to be agreed upon by 9 out of the 13 colonies, and then it was actually ratified fairly soon afterwards by 12 of those 13, and it took 2 years later, I think it was for Rhode Island, to finally sign on after the Bill of Rights was ratified. So by bringing the Bill of Rights, you got that last state. But it's because George Washington promised people like Patrick Henry. Let me show you a picture of him. That's the Bill of Rights. There's Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry was one of the delegates from the colonies that said, we will not ratify the Constitution unless we are able to have a Bill of Rights. And so we have Patrick Henry to thank as one of the people that helped spur on the ability of creating a Bill of Rights, because the Constitution gave the federal government a lot of powers. The Bill of Rights is what gives us a lot of powers and how to distinguish between the two. That's why it was so important. Okay, so let's go into some of the necessities and some of the things you need to learn about the Bill of Rights. Okay, when the Constitution was drafted, 1787, remember, there's two major groups that were formed. Basically, almost two political parties, but it was not Democrat and Republican. It was Federalists and Anti-Federalists, which basically means the Federalists wanted to have more power inside a central government. So they supported the Constitution as it was and urged the government, urging that the government didn't need a list of protective rights. Now, that was the extreme of the Federalists. You also had the Anti-Federalists. Now, you had like Alexander Hamilton, who was a Federalist, Patrick Henry, who was an Anti-Federalist. They had opposition to the Constitution because it gave the federal government too many rights, which leads to tyranny, which leads to a monarchy, which leads to dictatorship and everything else, which is why they were so concerned with the federal government having so much power. So the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists had to come together. There had to be a way of doing this. Now, during the time of the ratification of the Constitution, so signing it into law, when the ninth colony agreed upon it, it was because they received a response from George Washington and for others in the government that there would be a Bill of Rights written. Now, 3 states automatically signed up as soon as that was done. So it went from 9 to 11, and then I think 1 soon after that. Oh, sorry, 9 was right before. Yeah, so okay, I think it was 3 that basically signed up right as soon as that agreement happened. Then there was another one, and then 2 years later, finally Rhode Island would join. So let's go through what the 12 amendments were. Okay, so in 1789, Madison proposed 12 amendments to Congress. The first did not pass at the time. So 12 amendments was struck down. It's too much. They did not want 12 amendments and what they brought. So 1, a rule on congressional apportionment. So this was one of the things that they would not agree on. What does that mean? It basically means it's a reconstruction of where the actual power was in Congress and how they proportion the people in Congress. Remember, the House was basically based on the population of a state. And if you're in the southern states with slaves, those only counted as 3/5 of a vote to pass anything. Because again, they wanted to make sure that the South wanted to make sure that their large states with a large population wanted to have as much power as the smaller states or more than the smaller states. So then we had the House constructed, built, formed. There we go. Now, you also had the Senate. Now, the Senate, it did not matter about population whatsoever. It was 2 delegates from every state, and we still have that today. The House, the same thing. House is based on population. The Senate is based on if you are a state, you get 2 senators. And that's how we were able to split the difference. So the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists were happy. Now, in the 12 amendments passed by Madison, brought to us by Madison, he wanted a rule to reappropriate, to redistinguish the numbers and how it'd be brought up. They automatically struck that one out. That was not happening. They already ruled that out back when they first passed the Constitution. Or actually, when they first started drafting the Constitution, that was one of the first things out. That they had, well, okay, that wasn't the first thing out. That was already decided on back then. The second thing, and this is another big one. This, and again, the reason why number 1 was such an importance is because they already set it in stone. They did not want to change it. The U.S. Constitution was not to be changed. And so, yes, it has been amended, but that was one of the things that they did not want to change because it gave everyone equal say as much as they could with, again, the compromises that they had. Okay, the second one, also important to understand, is this was a restriction on Congress changing its salaries. Oh, wait a second. Yeah, I don't know. That just, to me, Congress should not set its own salaries. It's like if I came into an office, I was working for a private company, I said, this is my salary and that's it. You don't get to decide. The boss is like, forget that, you're fired. Congress, though, can come in and say, oh, I agree that we should get a 10% increase. I want 10% more money. And then the rest of the Congress says, yeah, me too. Yeah. Let's vote on that. And they all vote for what? They all vote for increasing their own money. So, doesn't seem about right. But they wanted to, so Madison wanted to restrict congressional changes in its salary. This was ratified. This was not accepted, did not become one of the top 10 amendments, but it was actually ratified in 1992. This is like Bill Clinton age. So in 1992, they said, hey, you know what, Congress, you can vote for your own salaries increases. This is known as the 27th Amendment. So why in the world would we change that from then? I mean, at the same time, who would be the one to actually change the salaries? Technically, a person that's in Congress, nowadays, in the past, they did not do this. In the past, they came in during certain parts of the year, and then they went home and worked. Yeah, that's right. Congress, House, and Senate would work in Washington for a certain amount of time, and then they go home and work. They were farmers. They were lawyers. They were all these other things. And later on, it became a full-time job. So at this point, you got to think, okay, so we've been a country for about 250 years, right? So by being a country in 250 years, the salary could have been something like $1,000 a year. Well, you know what? A congressman back then would just say, oh, that's great. Oh, I'm rich for that. Because people didn't get paid that much back then. They thought that it was a great salary, whatever it is. I don't actually know the salary at the time. Now, it's a full-time job. You can't live off $1,000. So, the question would be, who actually decides on the increase in pay in Congress? If Congress can't approve their own salary, no one's over them. Well, the executive branches, but they're not going to do that. I mean, they'd have so much power, basically controlling the Senate and the House by doing it. The judiciary, they can't do that. Actually, I don't even know who changes the judiciary branch. That's an interesting thing to think about. And who changes their salaries? Or who changes the executive branch? That probably all goes back to Congress. All based on, basically, the 27th Amendment. Now, there was actually increases, but that's time for later on to figure out how that is actually done. Okay, so the remaining 10 amendments were ratified, were finally agreed upon. Again, the proposal came out in 1789. It took them 2 years to finally agree on the first 10 amendments, which became what we call the Bill of Rights. This document right here, the Bill of Rights. Okay, so the Bill of Rights is a protection for us against the U.S. government. It's not what the government's allowed to do, what they can restrict and things like that. No, this is you are the people and these are your rights. These are protective rights forever. Unless they have a constitutional Congress and bring all the states together to change an amendment, or which they hold off on right now because people don't trust the politicians to do what's best for the states. They just don't trust them. The congressional polling shows that they're at one of the lowest points. Actually, they've increased a little bit since the last few months, but basically Congress is at its lowest point of trust ever. So let's go through the top 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. Number 1, this is the most important freedom that we have, and this includes a lot of different freedoms. So this protects us from with the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, and press, but also assembly, which means we can assemble. You can't restrict our assemblement, which is funny because I think in COVID, they actually restricted us from assembling. Churches, groups. So they actually somewhat broke that down. And yes, there's been lawsuits about it. Some have been on the side of freedom. Some have actually been against people assembling. Yeah. Again, the judiciary branch of the states were the ones that were upholding the ability for the government, not the federal government, the state government was doing this, to restrict assembly. The Constitution, remember, is the federal government. The Bill of Rights is our laws, is our rights against the federal government. And the last one is to petition. Petition is basically to go out and get large amounts of people together in order to fight a certain thing. So they could not stop us from speech, religion, press, assembly, and petition. At the same time, you might say the censorship that's going on, whether it's social media or whether it's other things, has been held back fairly recently. Religion, COVID, that was stopping our freedom. There was actually a state, and I can't remember which state it was, that actually tacked a driveway, a parking lot of a church, threw nails down so no one could drive in. How sinister is that? Press, not much. Like, there are lawsuits about them, but most of the time it's slander and other things that they've done that are actually wrong. And that's why it goes to the courts. Same with speech, religion, those all go to the courts too. Assembly. Now, we already know that they did stop assembly during the initial crackdown. Remember, 3 weeks to stop the spread. But it didn't stop there. A lot of states kept it going for like 2 years afterwards. Okay, so this was a crucial part of our rights because under British rule, Americans were jailed for even criticizing the king. Now, do you want to be able to criticize the president? Yes, you do. So this is a very important amendment to you. Do you want to be able to criticize a political party? Yes, you do. Do you want to be able to criticize a congressman, a senator? Here's the thing. In Germany right now, it is actually against the law to speak out and criticize people in Germany. The politicians, they actually wrote a law that stops people from criticizing or insulting the politicians. Sorry. That's above, we would never do that. If we ever did, you would have people up at arms. I mean, literally at arms. Which brings on the Second Amendment. It's the right to bear arms. Okay, so here's the wording. You need to hear this. Gives individuals the, okay, this is my note, sorry. I thought I had written it down verbatim, but gives individuals the rights to own weapons. Now, this is interesting because, and I actually need to bring this up. I thought I had this in the notes, but I did not have it in here. Let me get 1 second. Okay, here we go. So I got the wording up here. It says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security for a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay, so let's get the commas in there. Okay, a well-regulated militia, comma, done. You got a well-regulated militia. Being necessary to the security of the free state. Great. Boom. Comma there. So, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Done. Okay. Then it talks about the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay, so those are two different things. Well-regulated militia and the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You've got two things in there that are essential. One is militia. At the time, again, you did have the federal government starting to create a military, Navy, Army, so forth. But you also now have the people to have the ability to bear arms, and also a well-regulated militia. Now, a well-regulated militia does not actually say that it's a state militia. Yes, it does say to secure a free state, but it does not say it's organized by any kind of government. It's just a well-regulated militia. So, you could actually create a well-regulated militia. You have to be able to make sure it's well-regulated. What does that mean? It's basically up to you to figure that out. And you could actually create this militia to, again, for the security of a free state. Now, you could not actually say, I'm doing this for my neighborhood. Sorry, that does not actually apply. You cannot go up against the state government. No, 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 no. That's not what it's for. You are there to keep a free state. That's what the militia is there for. Now, again, this can be construed different ways. But the second part is what I want to get to. It's the most important part in this discussion. It's the right of the people to keep. I have a safe. I have guns. There you go. Keep and bear. Oh, actually, I probably lost those guns. I think I brought them out to the lake. I was just shooting duck, and they all fell into the water, right? And they all got lost. I don't know where they went. Okay, so yeah. But if I was to have any weapons, I would have the right to keep and bear arms. I could actually keep them, and I'd be able to use them. Now, and this shall not be infringed. Now, there are laws about how I use them. Those are usually done in the state. There are also some federal laws. You cannot have a fully automatic weapon that is against federal law. In here, does not say anything about a fully automatic weapon. So, they can actually write a law that says you cannot have a fully automatic weapon. Okay, that is the federal government's right. But they cannot keep you from keeping and bearing arms. Okay, let's go to... That was just a long way. Yeah. The next one, the Third Amendment, was very important because this is what the British did. It prevented the government from forcing citizens to house soldiers in their homes during peacetime. Wait a second, during peacetime? Okay, now we got to go read Third Amendment. No soldier shall, in the time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in times of war. Oh, there we go. It's in times of war too, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Interesting enough, so the British Quartering Act was not actually to put them in your house when you're there. The Quartering Act was to quarter them, to house them in the time that there was open a place that they could actually stay. So you did not have to move out the colonists in order to house soldiers. That was not the law. It was actually that they could take over a facility and house the soldiers if they so deemed necessary, if there's no one in there. So that was the point of the British having their law, and this is our counteraction, so that they could not actually mandate us to house house the armed forces, the soldiers. Okay, Fourth Amendment, protecting against reasonable searches. Now, the British government would come in and just seize anything, go in and sort through your things, bust into your house during any time of the day, and figure out what they want. If they're looking for a crime of some sort, they could find it there. If they're looking for weapons, they could find it there. They didn't need a warrant. Now you need a warrant. Now, interesting enough, like right now is the talk on immigration. Now, this is a little bit different, but when it comes to a warrant, this actually allows you from, let's see, the immigration, there's a scare out there. Now, it's interesting because the schools are actually perpetuating this scare. The U.S. government is not going to go into any school unless there's reasonable understanding that the kids might be in danger or that there is an illegal hiding there that is a criminal. And you know how we know this? Is because they cannot go into a school unless there's a warrant. That's why a warrant is so important. Whether it's in our house or whether it's in our property of some sort. Our business, they can't come in unless they have a warrant. They can't go into a school unless they have a warrant. And that basically shows that not the government, the judges believe that there is danger, that it needs to be done there. Because if the judge thinks, oh, if this person's in there and they're going to leave at night, you can grab them at the end of the night. Great. But if they have any concern that their person is going to get away, they're going to be able to sign that warrant and allow enforcement officers to go in there and search. Anyone that is telling you that they're going to allow people, ICE agents or anybody to go in and ransack a school just to find a single person without a warrant is lying to you. Teachers, principals, school districts lying to you. if they say that the federal government's going to do that. They cannot enter unless there's a warrant, and there's no warrant unless a court accepts it. Okay. Whew. Now that we got that done, okay, let's go talk about the Fifth Amendment. And also, just so you know, the Fourth Amendment also means that there's going to be a warrant and probable cause, which is why the judge has to sign off on the warrant. No federal officer can sign off on a warrant. It has to go through the judiciary branch. Checks and balances. We talked about this last week. Fifth Amendment. Now, this is a great one. If you go to court, you cannot self-incriminate yourself. You can say, I plead the Fifth. By pleading the Fifth, it basically means that you cannot, anything that's being said that you are saying, anything that you would say if by answering a question would not allow you to, would not allow the courts to hold that up against you. Now, at the same time, if you do that in front of the jury's going to know something's up. But they also give you the right to not self-incriminate. It also allows for you not to have double jeopardy, which means they can't try you, lose the case, and then try you again, and then try you 10 different times just to be able to throw you in jail. You get one time in court, the court's basically need to decide it, and if they find you not guilty, now I'm not saying innocent, but not guilty, then you can't be tried again for that one criminal act, or if you have a list of them, for those criminal acts. Now, what about the Sixth Amendment? The Sixth Amendment is the right to a fair trial. Okay, this means speedy trial. It means you don't have to wait 5 years like we had to do with the state of Missouri because of a labor dispute. Yeah. I had a contractor, wanted to be a contractor. They said it should be employee, so they've been taking money from me. You know what? It's a few $1,000s. I think that's a lot. But that's not the federal government. That is a state entity, a state department. And when I go after them, I will go straight after them, not after the federal government. Again, these are federal government rights. So a speedy trial, a jury. You get to have your peers to go into court to judge you. It doesn't have to be a judge. It doesn't have to be anybody else. You get a jury. And the right to an attorney. That's right. You get a right to have an attorney to plead on your side, to help you defend your rights. Seventh Amendment is a right to a jury in civil cases. So guarantees a jury trial for civil lawsuits. So civil and punitive. Civil basically means an issue between you and another citizen. Civil lawsuits over $20. So if it's over $20, boom, you can have a jury. I sure hope you don't do it for $20. That would be an expensive act. Don't do it. If it's $20, and again, that was a long time ago, just give it up. It's fine. It's $20. Okay. Amendment 8. No cruel and unusual punishment. This also includes no excessive bail. You can't have $1 million if you're a person that makes $50,000 a year. There's no way you're going to be able to do that. Fines. You can't have fines that are way astronomical. And also inhumane punishment if you're put into a prison or jail. They can't whip you. They can't brand you. They can't do all these things that in the past they actually could do. You know, pirates would actually be branded so that anytime they did a transaction, you could actually see that the brand is actually on their hand. And made it so pirates did not want to, one, be caught because they'd be branded. And then anyone that would shake your hand would know exactly who you were and such. But there's all these different things that can happen in prison that they said, no, we don't want any cruel and unusual punishment. Ninth Amendment, the right not listed still exist. What? Rights not listed still exist. Okay. Say people have rights beyond those explicitly listed in the Constitution. These are different types of amendments. We'll actually have to go through this one individually. The Ninth Amendment is important, but it's more of just like your natural born rights. Okay, actually, you know what? For this reason, I'm going to go to the Ninth Amendment so we can actually read it. Ninth Amendment. And this is Ninth Amendment. Yeah, it's really short. The enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed or to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So basically this says that if it's written in the Constitution, certain rights shall not be denied you or could not be restricted from you that would be given to other people. I hope that makes sense. All right. 10th Amendment limits federal power by saying any power not given by the federal government belongs to the states. Okay, so if all of a sudden something new comes up and the federal government has not ruled on it, that is now part of a state's rights until the federal government decides to pass a law on it. And if it passes a law on it, there has to be a large majority to do it. So these are the top 12, or sorry, top 10. Okay, I know we're already running late because there's a lot in the Bill of Rights. Let's go over foreign policy really fast. Okay, so what happened right after the American Revolution? Okay, you had the French Revolution. And because of it, you had France that basically wanted the US, the United States, to come to their help. Well, in 1789, France erupted into a revolution. By 1793, King Louis the XVI was executed. Britain and France went to war also. This is another war. So we basically said, because of George Washington, because again, we were just starting up a government, we had no strength behind us really at this point. We had to have neutrality. So when the French Revolution started and they executed King Louis the XVI, the United States said, we can't do anything about it. We have to back off from this. Britain and France went to war. And both sides expected the U.S. to help. France helped America in the American Revolution. And the British was America's basically the biggest trading partner. And the United States said, you know what, we're not getting into the middle of this. Still forming, but still being neutral. Washington issued a neutrality proclamation in 1793. Again, same year that King Louis the 16th was killed, saying that the U.S. would not take sides in a European war. They basically said, you're Europe, you get to decide that. And it was more of the fact that, again, the country, the United States, was just building. They were just getting power. This angered both the Federalists and the new party that came up, the Democratic Republicans, because it created this divide between the two sides. Both sides had different opinions on it. So a lot of this, it's 2 months away, but we're going to be talking about the War of 1812, which is actually a big war that we don't usually talk about. Let me talk about, there's one other thing. Let's talk about the Edmund Charles Guenet. He's a French diplomat, came to the United States to recruit U.S. citizens to fight for France. This was called the Citizen Guenet Affair, or Guenet Affair. This violates the U.S. neutrality, or violated the U.S. neutrality, and Washington demanded his recall. Edmund Charles Guenet was sent home, sent packing back to France. The results, America reaffirmed its independence from European conflicts. As he said, we're not doing this. So that's one thing that came up because of it. And George Washington, again, the unifier between both parties, he had people in his cabinet from both sides. He basically said, we are staying neutral. For now, we are staying completely neutral. Now, this will go back, we'll talk about this again in during the War of 1812, but the British impressment. So impressment was basically where the British could capture a U.S. ship and force its sailors into the British Army. Now, this is interesting because it's not that simple. It's basically where the British would capture a U.S. ship, and if there was any British residents, anyone that came over from Britain as an immigrant or so, and then fought for was board one of those ships, they could be impressed. Not anybody from there, but anyone that was a British citizen in any way. Now, they stretched the rules, but this is basically what it was. There was also the Jay Treaty. Washington sent John Jay. Again, he was if I remember right, he was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He was also someone that basically helped establish the country. The British agreed to leave forts in the Northwest Territories. So, in the United States, Northwest, you have the colonies, and you are the colonies that became states, and then the Northwest, you had still British forts. Now, we're going to get into this as well with the War of 1812. So I'm going to push this off until later on. There's also Spain and Pinckney's Treaty. Spain controlled Florida and the Mississippi River, cutting off U.S. trade. Pinckney's Treaty with Spain basically gave America free navigation of the Mississippi River and access to New Orleans for trade. This is again before they basically took over New Orleans with the Louisiana Purchase. We'll talk about that later on. So the reason why Washington's foreign policy really mattered and why it was so important is Washington kept the United States out of war. Again, as a fledgling nation, we needed to stay out of war, which allowed the country to stabilize and to grow. This gave a few years before anything else would happen. Okay, what else? This policy also created a precedent for neutrality, which basically shaped U.S. foreign policy all the way up until World War I, when we joined for World War I, and then World War II, and then we started to get out of that whole understanding. That policy basically went to the wayside at the time. Okay, so really fast, let's recap what we did, because I'm a little bit over time. The Bill of Rights and Washington's foreign policy shaped early America in two crucial ways. One, the Bill of Rights secured our individual freedoms, and Washington's neutrality policy kept the U.S. out of costly European wars. So these decisions made the foundation of the Constitution and future foreign policy strategies. These are great. But here's my question for you. This is your action question. Do you think that Washington should have taken a stronger stance against Britain and France? Should he have joined one of them, maybe during the French Revolution? I mean, they were trying to, it was the people that came up in arms against the French bureaucrats and leadership. Should we have given some power to them? Or should we have favored our biggest trading partner versus France? Both parties we were very much part to. We had influence on, and they had influence on us. Should we have helped them out? I mean, seriously, how do we help both sides with two partners? Near impossible. Okay, that's it. That's it. We're done. Thank you much for joining with me and also staying around for a little bit longer. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks for listening. Stay tuned. Wednesday, we're talking about something that's very important. It's called the Whiskey Rebellion. You ever heard of it? Not many people have. But they have heard of Alexander Hamilton and how he almost screwed up the whole country. We're going to get to that on Wednesday. So thanks very much for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.